Imagine two men walking into the same room. The first one arrives. The second one appears. You know the difference before either has spoken, before either has done anything at all. You feel it in the quality of movement, in the specific kind of stillness that one carries and the other does not. Something in the room responds to the first man before he has given it any reason to. And you cannot quite name what produced that response. This is the thing everyone is reaching for when they talk about carrying yourself like a king. Not the title, not the clothes, not the studied poses they practice in the mirror. The quality of a person who is not performing for the room, who has moved past the need to perform, and whose presence, because of that, produces an effect that no performance ever quite manages to replicate. Most people spend years trying to acquire this quality through its surface expressions. They study the posture, the voice, the controlled expression, the strategic silence, and the results are always the same. The quality appears briefly in low-stakes situations and vanishes completely under the first real pressure, because it was a performance. And performances fail at the moments that matter most, precisely the moments in which the real thing would have held. Niccolo Machiavelli spent his career watching this failure and its opposite with unusual precision. He watched men who had built genuine authority and men who were performing it, and he documented, in the cold, methodical, occasionally brutal style that made The Prince one of the most controversial books ever written, exactly what the difference was. In chapter 18 he observed, "Men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand, because it belongs to everybody to see you, to few to come in touch with you. What the eye sees is the surface. What the hand finds is the substance, and the life built on surface eventually produces a person who cannot withstand contact." By the end of this, you will understand what the fire in the thumbnail is actually about, what it forges in the person who walks through it. You will understand the 4 specific domains that produce the quality the viewer recognizes in that first man before he has spoken. And you will encounter the single principle that makes all 4 make sense. You cannot act like a king. You can only become one. The composure you want has to be earned, and the earning happens in 4 furnaces. Part 1. What the fire does. Composure is not a character trait. It is the residue of what the fire burned away. The man walking out of flames in the thumbnail is not performing calm. He is carrying the weight of something that has already been resolved. The fire is behind him. It was real. He walked through it, not around it, not avoiding it. And what came out the other side is not the same thing that went in. Something was burned away. Something was tested and held. And the quality the viewer recognizes in his presence is not a pose he adopted. It is the shape that the burning left. This is what Machiavelli understood about genuine authority, that the source scripts around him almost always miss. The prince who commanded genuine respect was not the one who had learned to appear commanding. He was the one who had been tested, who had operated under the specific pressures of real political life, where the consequences of a wrong decision were not social discomfort but exile, imprisonment, or death, and whose character had been revealed and refined by that testing. The appearance of authority was, in the men Machiavelli most admired, simply what genuine self-command looked like from the outside. It was not the cause, it was the result. Most people approach the question backwards. They identify the outward quality they want, the composure, the deliberateness, the ease under pressure, and try to produce it directly through technique. They study how confident people hold their posture. They practice the controlled pause before speaking. They work on the expression that reveals nothing. And in low-stakes environments where the pressure is not high enough to crack the performance, this works well enough. They look the part. But the fire does not care about technique. The fire is the actual situation, the confrontation you did not expect, the failure that arrives without warning, the relationship that demands something you have not yet built the capacity to give, the moment when the circumstances are genuinely against you and the comfortable performance has nowhere to stand. In that moment, the performance collapses. And what is underneath it? The actual state of the person, their actual relationship with their own fear and their own reactions, is what determines whether they hold or whether they fold. This is why the gap between looking like the man in the thumbnail and being him is almost never about technique. It is about history. The specific history of having been in enough actual fires, having held when holding was difficult, having failed to hold and then built something from that failure, and having continued in both cases until the quality of the response under pressure became less a matter of effort and more a matter of character. Character is not given. It is deposited in small amounts in every moment that demanded something and was met honestly. This is why the question is not how to look like you have walked through fire. The question is how to actually walk through it. How to build the 4 internal conditions that make you capable of holding in those moments, so that what the room feels when you walk in is not a posed confidence but a genuine one. A quality earned through exactly the kind of repeated testing and deliberate construction that most people avoid because it is less comfortable than practicing in the mirror. The 4 pillars, mind, mouth, moves, and money, are not 4 things to perform. They are 4 furnaces. Each one burns away something specific. Each one, endured and worked through, produces a different dimension of the quality the viewer is reaching for. And the man who has walked through all 4 carries something in his presence that no amount of surface study can replicate, because it is not a surface phenomenon. It was forged. Part 2. The Prince's Architecture. Machiavelli did not describe a performance. He described a construction. When Machiavelli wrote in chapter 18 that a prince must be both the lion and the fox, the lion to frighten wolves, the fox to recognize traps, he was not describing 2 personality types to adopt in rotation. He was describing a cognitive architecture, the simultaneous capacity to act with decisive force when force is required and to navigate with careful intelligence when intelligence is required. And the critical word is simultaneous, not alternating, not situational. A genuine integration of both capacities in the same person, available at the same moment, without the person needing to decide in advance which one the situation will call for. This integration does not come naturally. The person who defaults to force, who leads every situation with aggression and dominance, has the lion without the fox. They are powerful in direct confrontations and catastrophically vulnerable in situations that require navigation. The person who defaults to cleverness, who maneuvers around every situation, who is never quite direct enough to be trusted, has the fox without the lion. They are safe and ineffective. The genuinely capable person has built both, which requires having been in enough different kinds of situations to have developed both, which requires a willingness to be tested in conditions that reveal which one is currently missing. This is the architectural argument of the prince that most readers skip past on their way to the dramatic passages about fear and love. Machiavelli was fundamentally interested in what produced genuine political capability in a human being. Not what produced the appearance of it, but what produced the actual thing. His answer was preparation and adaptability. The prince who had built institutions, alliances, and personal capabilities that were not contingent on any single circumstance faring well, was the prince who could absorb the inevitable reversals of fortune without losing his position. The one who had built a position based on a single favorable condition, popularity, the support of one powerful ally, a period of easy circumstances, was catastrophically vulnerable to the withdrawal of that condition. Let me say something here that the source content on this topic never says. The four-pillar framework, mind, mouth, moves, money, is genuinely useful. But the source material presents it as a program for dominance. Master these four things and become untouchable, become feared, become a king. That framing is both seductive and misleading. It is seductive because it implies that these four things, built correctly, produce a kind of invulnerability, a state in which nothing can reach you. Machiavelli was under no such illusion. He was arrested, tortured, and exiled by the very city he had served. He did not become untouchable. He became capable. He built enough internal architecture that when everything external was stripped away, he still had something to work with. He went to his farm and wrote The Prince. That is not invulnerability. That is resilience built on a foundation that remained when the surface was gone. If this kind of thinking is useful to you, the ideas that don't get softened, the ones that actually ask something of you, subscribe to Wise Daily. That's what we're here for. The four furnaces are not a path to invulnerability. They are a path to genuine capability, to being someone whose presence in a room is real rather than performed, whose composure under pressure is structural rather than tactical, and who has, by the specific work of having built each one, earned the right to carry the quality that the thumbnail shows, not claimed it, earned it. This distinction between claiming a quality and earning it is the central thing that the source material around Machiavelli almost universally misses. You cannot claim your way to the quality in the thumbnail. Every performance of it that is not yet backed by the substance will eventually encounter a situation that exposes the gap. And that exposure, while painful, is actually the beginning of the earning. The fire reveals what is not yet there, which is the only way to know what still needs building. Part 3. The four furnaces. The first furnace is the mind. What it burns away is reactivity. The reactive person is a person who is operated. Their internal state changes in direct response to external events. The approval arrives and they expand. The criticism lands and they contract. The provocation triggers the reaction it was designed to trigger. They are, in Machiavelli's terms, a prince whose position depends entirely on the continued goodwill of external forces. And that position is only as stable as those forces are constant, which is to say, not very. The mind furnace is the practice of inserting a pause between the stimulus and the response, not suppressing the response. That produces a different kind of problem, but creating enough space that the response can be chosen rather than triggered. The Stoics called this the inner citadel, a place of internal sovereignty from which no external event could dislodge you unless you opened the gate. Machiavelli called it a virtue, the disciplined will to act with precision when everything around you is demanding panic. The practical work is the same. In the situations that most consistently trigger reactive behavior, practice holding for one beat longer than feels comfortable before responding. Over time, the pause becomes structural. The reactivity diminishes not because the feelings disappear, but because they no longer govern. The second furnace is the mouth. What it burns away is the need to be understood. The need to be understood is one of the most expensive needs a person can carry into a social environment. It produces over-explanation, over-justification, and the constant performance of a person trying to manage how they are being interpreted. Every explanation is an admission that you require the listener's understanding to feel secure. Every defense is a concession that their accusation was serious enough to demand a response. And the person who requires understanding is controlled by whoever threatens to withhold it. The mind furnace burns away reactivity, the compulsion to respond before choosing. The mouth furnace burns away the need to be understood, the compulsion to explain before allowing. The moves furnace burns away impulsiveness, the compulsion to act before calculating. The money furnace burns away dependence, the compulsion to comply before the leverage is removed. The third furnace is the moves. What it burns away is impulsiveness. The fox and the lion, the cognitive architecture Machiavelli was describing, requires the capacity to act without being rushed into action. Most impulsive decisions are made in response to a feeling, urgency, a fear, the need to prove something, the discomfort of inaction. The person who has built the capacity to sit with that discomfort long enough to evaluate the actual situation before acting has removed a mechanism by which most bad decisions are made. The lion acts when it is time to act. The fox moves when the terrain has been read. Neither is governed by the feeling that something must be done right now. The fourth furnace is money. What it burns away is dependence. Financial sovereignty is not the measure of a person. The source material around this topic consistently conflates the two, and that conflation is both reductive and false. A person's worth is not their net worth, but financial dependence is a specific structural vulnerability that limits the decisions a person can make. The person who cannot afford to say no, who cannot walk away from a situation that dishonors them because they cannot afford to, has a lever that anyone who knows about it can pull. Machiavelli understood this clearly. The prince who owed his position to a single source of support was always at the mercy of that source. Removing the lever, building enough genuine financial independence that the fear of losing income is not the dominant factor in your major decisions, is the work of the money furnace. Not wealth for its own sake, autonomy sufficient to choose. Part 4. The man who walks out. The man in the thumbnail has walked through all four, not necessarily in sequence, not necessarily by design, but through the accumulated weight of situations that demanded something, and the decision, made or not made, consciously or not, to actually engage with what was demanded rather than avoided. The mind was trained through the moments when everything demanded reaction, and he held. The mouth was disciplined through the moments when everything demanded explanation, and he stayed quiet. The movement was refined through the moments when impulsiveness would have been easy, and he waited. The independence was built through the seasons when dependence was comfortable, and he chose the harder, slower path of building something that was his. None of this was glamorous. None of it produced immediate visible results. Most of the people in his life during those seasons did not understand what he was doing or why, and he did not explain it to them because the mouth furnace had already burned away that need. He simply continued in the unglamorous, unwitnessed, unacknowledged work of actually building the four things rather than performing having built them. And then one day, not with the dramatic announcement, not with the moment of breakthrough the source scripts always promise, the quality simply became present, not because he had mastered anything, because enough had been burned away that what was underneath became visible. The composure, the ease, the specific kind of authority that a room responds to before either party has spoken. These were not achievements he had arrived at. They were what remained when the reactivity, the need to be understood, the impulsiveness, and the dependence had been sufficiently reduced that they no longer obscured his actual character. This is what Machiavelli's prince was, at his best. Not a man who had learned to appear powerful, a man who had built enough that power was simply the accurate description of his position. who move through the world with the ease of someone who has genuinely done the work, who has been through the fire, and who carries the specific quality of a person who no longer needs to perform their own authority, because there is nothing left for them to be anxious about losing. You cannot walk out of fire you never entered. The composure you want has to be earned. There is no other way in. You cannot walk out of fire you never entered. The composure you want has to be earned. There is no other way in. Most of us want the quality from the outside, the posture, the deliberateness, the ease, while avoiding the fires that produce it. We want the arrival without the walk. The source material around this topic is in many ways a guide to that avoidance. How to look like someone who has walked through fire without having to do so. Machiavelli was writing for the people willing to engage with how things actually worked. The Prince was written in exile, stripped of everything, and he still had enough to work with because he had built the 4 furnaces. You cannot walk out of fire you never entered. The composure you want has to be earned. There is no other way in. Where in your life are you performing the quality rather than building it? If that question landed, type "I enter the fire" in the comments. Not for me, but for you. And if this video gave you something real, please like it, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Wise Daily. Every video on this channel is built to give you one thing: the philosophical tools to live with more power, more clarity, and more intention. We'll see you in the next one. Machiavelli showed us the external architecture, the 4 furnaces that produce the quality of genuine presence. But there is a philosopher who spent his entire life working on what happens inside the furnace, who wrote about the specific internal experience of being tested, of holding under pressure, of continuing to act well when nothing external was rewarding it. That philosopher is Marcus Aurelius. And what he wrote, alone at night during the wars he never asked for, is the subject of our next video.